Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our Wednesday webinar series. Today, our topic is Debunking the Myth, U.S. versus Chinese Manufacturing, with our special guest presenter, Eric Boud, who is a consultant who helps companies go direct to factory and mitigate the risk when dealing with manufacturers both domestically and internationally. With a degree in manufacturing engineering technology and his ability to speak Mandarin, he's helped dozens of companies learn how to navigate the cultural and technical intricacies surrounding product development and manufacturing. He's worked in various industries, including electronics, consumer goods, and medical devices, and is currently the owner and president of Rover Manufacturing Consulting based here in Utah. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Eric.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Maureen. Looking forward to the presentation and hope that it can be of value to everybody. So if anybody's got questions, I'm happy to address those at the end, and we will get started. Assuming it'll let me change slides. There we go. So anyway, I'm going to kind of cover three of the main myths surrounding U.S. and Chinese manufacturing. I'll focus the first one kind of on the U.S., and then we'll do one on China, and then kind of comparing the two together. So one of the common things that I hear lots of companies say when people are asking me about looking for a manufacturer, different things, a lot of people will tell me that, oh, I can't go to the U.S. because U.S. manufacturing is dead. And really couldn't be further from the truth. I actually love working with U.S. manufacturers and trying to bring as much manufacturing back to the U.S. as possible. But really, U.S. manufacturing is doing pretty well in a lot of ways. These are stats as of 2016 from the National Association of Manufacturers. In 2016, U.S. manufacturing was a $2.18 trillion market. There's about 12.5 million manufacturing jobs. And it really contributes to the overall economy a lot more than people give it credit. So every dollar spent in manufacturing contributes somewhere between $1.89 and $3.60, depending on where you get your data from. But right around that much in overall economic growth. And that also equates to about 400 jobs in other sectors for every 100 manufacturing jobs. It pays a lot better than other industries. And so it really is a fascinating and an interesting industry to be a part of. In Utah alone, we've got around 4,000 manufacturers. Here's a bunch of products that are currently being made in Utah. There's really just about everything being made overseas is also being made in the U.S. with a few exceptions, but I mean, some of these examples, we do a lot of fighter jets and things here in Utah, blenders. Purple Mattresses are here in Utah. Bullfrog Spas manufacture hot tubs, as well as things like bowling balls, mascot costumes. You got the Jazz Bear over there on the right. A lot of the roller coasters that you'd ride both at Lagoon but also around the country are designed and manufactured here in Utah. So there's really a lot going on, and there really is a lot of opportunity in U.S. manufacturing, but there are certain things that kind of lead to some of those myths and the rumors about U.S. manufacturing maybe not being as good as it once was, or different things like that. A lot of that comes from an age gap and a skills gap in the manufacturing industry. So these are some other statistics. It's expected that over the next decade, nearly 3.5 million manufacturing jobs need to be filled, and then the chart on the right kind of shows where we're at for that. So in the middle, it shows that of those 3.5 million jobs, about 75%-ish are due to people retiring in the industry, and then another 800,000 from growth. But it's expected that 2 million of those jobs are going to go unfilled over the next decade. So we don't even have enough people coming into the industry to replace those that are leaving the industry. And so it's one of those things that need to be addressed. There's also a pretty low rate of engagement among employees in the manufacturing industry, with only about a quarter of the employees considering themselves engaged. And so, anyway, there's a lot of things that need to be addressed to help improve U.S. manufacturing, to make it more exciting, more profitable, and to grow it. And that's one of the things that I know the MEP Center is doing a lot of. I mean, that's their initiative is to go out and try to improve a lot of these maybe more struggling areas of U.S. manufacturing. I do a lot of that, trying to help spread awareness and appeal to a younger audience, as well as just helping existing manufacturers know how they can improve. And so there's a lot going on to make things better, and there's a lot of cool things that are happening. Moving along to myth number 2, another thing that I hear a lot of companies tell me is that they can't go to China to get anything made because China's out to get you, or they're going to steal your patent, or they're going to rip you off, steal your money, a lot of different things. And that also, which surprises a lot of people, is not true. From my experience, there's a lot more that goes into it. So the fact is, China's not out to get you, but they are different. I'm going to kind of cover 3 of the main things. I could do a full presentation on any one of these, and I've done it on some of them, but one of the biggest differences is their culture, and that's something that a lot of companies don't appreciate well enough. Some of the examples, I've got a picture of the color red on the screen, and in the U.S., we look at red. Red has its own cultural meaning to us. It means bad, stop, danger, different things like that. But in China, the color red actually means lucky or prosperous or good, royalty, security, different things like that. So, you think about that in a manufacturing setting, when you're asking a factory to mark defective products with red, though they do understand that and they'll do that and everything, but there's a cultural difference there where when they see a bunch of products in a red bin, they're fighting against that culture of, well, those are good products, so anyway, that leads to some issues, just some of those cultural things. Their education is really different. In the U.S., we're kind of encouraged to do free thinking and creative problem solving, and that's something that's just never really taught over there for all sorts of reasons. I won't get into the political side of things or anything, but an example I have that kind of demonstrates that is this picture on the right. Has some strawberries, obviously, and then this fruit on the left, the kind of neon yellow purple fruit, is called a passion fruit. Some people have had it before. I think it's delicious. So anyway, when I'm in China or Taiwan or anything and trying to get a snack, they have all these drink stands everywhere, and I'll go up to these drink stands, and they've always got passion fruit drinks and they've always got strawberry drinks. And I love getting these passion fruit or strawberry smoothies. But being American, I like to see if I can get them to combine the two to make myself a strawberry passion fruit smoothie. So when I go up and I talk to them, it has nothing to do with them being stupid or not being able to do something, but when I ask them to combine the two into a single drink, they literally cannot think through that process. I've been to dozens of different drink stands, even hundreds probably, but I go to them all the time and I get the weirdest results from asking for a strawberry passion fruit smoothie, even though it's really simple. All I'm asking them to do is make a smoothie and just put strawberry and passion fruit together. But they'll respond and say, we don't have that flavor. I say, well, you've got both of them, right? Yeah, you can order one or the other. I said, well, I want you to take both flavors and put them together. And just their education system, their culture has trained them to not be able to think outside the box, even at that level. And so, I got everything from, I'd have to order 2 and then pour half, then make a strawberry one, pour half into one cup, half into another cup, and then make a passion fruit one and then top off both cups and sell me both of them instead of just giving me the one. Sometimes they'd shake it. Sometimes they'd double the amount of ice in the blender and double the ingredients and then mix it all together. I got combinations that I didn't even know were possible when I just asked them to do that simple thing. Um, so anyway, you can imagine working in a manufacturing industry, working with a factory over there, when you're dealing with them, if you don't have an understanding of how they operate and how to actually communicate with them and get them to do what you need them to do, um, it creates tons of problems for companies. And it gets into some of how you get quality out of China is you have to know how to actually communicate with them and teach them and show them exactly what it is that you want. Um, really at a super basic level that a lot of companies don't appreciate. Another difference is their language. Obviously, everybody knows that there's a language gap in China, but a lot of people think that because somebody in the factory speaks English, that you're set and you'll be able to do it. And that leads to a ton of problems because you're not just dealing with a company in English. You also have to realize that you need to somebody needs to understand Chinese, somebody needs to understand English, and then somebody needs to understand the technical language. And usually the person that speaks English on their end doesn't speak the technical language, or they only understand written English or different things. So if you're only communicating in via email or written English, oftentimes if you try to have a conversation with them, they don't understand it, or they're relying a lot on translator apps and things. But that leads to a bunch of different problems because English and Chinese are so different that, there is no good way to translate a lot of things. This example over on the right from Google Translate, the Chinese characters say "bu pei," and if you type that into Google, like say a Chinese factory is trying to translate what they want to say, and they type it into their translator, "bu pei" comes out as not worth it. But it literally, when you're actually using it in Chinese, what it means is it doesn't fit. So say you've got two parts that have to mesh together, and I've had companies use examples like this when they've had trouble with it. But they'll say, like, the factory's trying to tell you that these two parts don't fit together. But when they send it out to you, it comes out as it's not worth it. Or if you're trying to translate it the other way and you're talking to them in English and they're trying to translate it back into Chinese, if you put "it doesn't fit," it actually translates as "不适合," which is actually, it's inappropriate. And so, simple things like that, when you're trying to troubleshoot quality issues, happen all the time because, again, the person on their end that speaks English doesn't necessarily understand technical English and vice versa. And so there's still a lot of communication barriers there. The other thing to realize is that somebody that does speak English over there is generally not, it gets kind of into the technical thing, but they're not engineers, they're not manufacturers. They're somebody that went to school to learn English and be fluent in that. And the same thing happens in the US. When you go to a manufacturer in the US, most of them are not fluent in different languages. Because they're focused on a trade. Anybody that knows how to build something has learned how to build things and to engineer things in school. They typically didn't spend as much time learning a foreign language, learning how to communicate in international business and stuff like that. So usually if you're speaking English to your factory, you're either one, not working with a factory, you end up working with a trading company where it's a business that focuses on international translation, and then they broker relationships with factories, or you're paying a lot more money than you need to for your products because a factory that can afford to hire somebody that's fluent they're doing pretty well because it's not a cheap employee to have over there. So anyway, the language barrier it's a lot bigger than people think. There's a lot of problems that happen with that, not understanding the cultural language and different things, why they say things, why they don't say thank you. All of that comes into play. Lots of people have seen these signs that are just funny translations. This one on the bottom says, it basically is, "with your help, we can get rid of trash," but comes out as, "if you would like to join us, rubbish will never be homeless." Here's a bunch of other funny ones. Some of my favorite ones are the racist park is actually like cultural park. Please present your octopus is please present your travel card. Fee-man and mailman bathrooms down at the bottom. The execution in progress is always fun. It means construction zone. or construction in progress, the hand grenade instead of fire extinguisher. So anyway, a lot of these come from, again, just a lack of understanding of the the technical or the cultural language differences, because translator apps from English to Chinese and vice versa just don't work very well. And then the last one, and a lot of people's favorite topic, is the whole patent fraud that goes on in China. And this is something that I talk to companies about all the time. And the biggest thing to understand is that Chinese are not bound by US patent law. So if you have a US patent and you're expecting your Chinese factory to honor that, there's nothing, first off, they don't understand the law. Second off, there's nothing holding them to that law. And so they have, in China, they've got their own patent office. It's this state intellectual property office, or SIPO, down at the bottom. That's their logo. We've got our logo. But Chinese people are not bound by US patent law. So having a US patent is not enforceable in China. That being said, there are a lot of ways to prevent your patent from being stolen in China, but a lot of that comes down to understanding how you actually prevent that fraud, how you build your relationship with your factory so that they don't go behind your back or do different things. And honestly, their culture over there is so loyal that I've never had a problem with patent fraud when I've set things up correctly. The one caveat to that is the first product that I ever designed and got manufactured over in China did get knocked off, but it got knocked off in a completely different market and ended up not being a big deal. But the factory was always loyal to us. You can work with them on verbal agreements and not have to have contractual things, and they're wonderful people to work with. But you do have to know how to prevent yourself. And one of the biggest things, honestly, that people don't appreciate enough is that, in my experience, I would say probably 90+% of the patent fraud that I've experienced or seen over in China does not come from Chinese companies. It usually comes from American companies that see your product, it's doing really well, and then they'll send it over to a different factory in China and ask them to knock it off. And again, that gets back to Chinese people are not bound by US patent law, and honestly, they don't understand US patent law any more than we understand Chinese patent law. And so most of the fraud that I've seen actually comes from the US and not from China. And that's something that, again, you have to know how to protect yourself from that. But companies need to realize that it's not about just your Chinese factory is going to knock you off. You have to understand all of the intricacies of it and how to protect yourself, and again, be able to prevent yourself from a lot of US companies that are trying to knock you off instead of the Chinese companies. So obviously there's a lot more to that. Patent law over there, there's always exceptions and horror stories and different things, but that's kind of it can be a touchy subject, and I'm happy to answer any further questions on that and go into more depth. But we'll move on to myth number 3. That China is cheaper. This is true on occasion, but there is a break-even point, and it's not as often as people think. Most companies, especially startups and new companies trying to get new products or innovative products, will default to China because the price is cheaper. But there really is a lot more that goes into it than just the unit cost. So anyway, one of the things that I've specialized in is helping companies calculate and figure out when it actually makes sense to go to China and when it makes more sense to keep it here in the US. And more frequently than anybody really anticipates, it ends up being here in the US. Here's a list of things that have gone into different experiences that I've had and different companies that I've worked with that all have a dollar value associated with them, or you can put a dollar value to them and be able to calculate how expensive it really is, all of your hidden costs of working with Chinese manufacturers. And I wanted to give kind of an example of one of the companies that I walked through this process. They had a product, it was a plastic product, and most people that are looking for anything plastic just default to China because the tooling is cheaper and their products are always cheaper, and it's just plastic, so it must be cheaper. So I worked with them. We got a baseline US quote. I told him let's get a quote from somewhere, and then we'll run through some calculations and figure out what a comparable price is in the other location. So we got a quote from a US manufacturer here where they quoted the price for 93 cents. They had an order quantity. They wanted to start at 1,000 and then ramp up from there. But as I talked to them, worked through their situation, we factored in that the biggest variables in their particular situation were the unit cost, the quantity, the shipping lead time, their burn rate, and the tooling cost. And so, I mean, we calculated a lot of the other things that you see in the list, but those were the primary variables that most impacted the overall cost. So once we took everything into consideration and weighed all of the options, we found out that to go to China, in order to actually be competitive, you would have to get the same product in China for 9 cents, which is significantly lower than the 93 cents in the US. And honestly, for the product that they were doing, just couldn't be done. It didn't make sense. And so really, they ended up saving a lot more money by staying in the US, even though, I mean, we could have gotten it in China for probably 40 or 50 cents, which, again, a lot of companies will default and they're like, well, that's half the price, so it's got to be better. I'll just go there. But once you factor in all the hidden costs, if they had done that, they would have ended up losing a bunch of money on their products because of all of these other hidden costs that you have to factor in when you're actually deciding where your suppliers should be located. So anyway, that's one example. I've run through similar things, and sometimes the answer is that it is cheaper to do it in China. Sometimes it's not, but being able to understand and factor in the hidden costs and figuring out really what the best option is for your company is a lot more important than just defaulting to one location or the other. So anyway, that kind of wraps up the overall presentation that I had. Here's some additional articles that I've written that the University of Utah has published that give a little bit more insight into some things about U.S. manufacturing and some tips on Chinese manufacturing. And I'm happy to answer any further questions either now or feel free to shoot me an email or give me a phone call or anything, and I'm happy to go into more depth for specific situations. But anyway, yeah, I'd like to kind of turn the time over to some questions and see what everybody's doing.
And if you have any questions, again, please type them in the chat box. I will read them aloud and then we'll have Eric answer them. While we're waiting for questions, this presentation and the recording of Eric's presentation will be posted on our website. If you want the direct link to that, please email us at info@mep.utah.edu and I can send that to you, or just keep an eye out on our website for this. I can also email you the links to the articles he wrote for the Lassonde Center here at the U as well. Okay, so far I don't see any questions. Like Eric said, feel free to email him or call him directly with any questions, or if you're interested in working with him, or if you're interested in working with us, let us know. Thanks so much, Eric. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.